They didn't shove me. No shouting, no scene. Vanessa just looked over my shoulder, smiled at the church ladies, and said Rachel's tired. She'll sit this one out. And just like that, my name slid down the sign-up sheet for the Willowford Fall Supper, off pies onto cleanup. Someone handed me a roll of black trash bags as if it were a corsage. You ever feel a room tilt when no one moves? The basement smelled like coffee grounds and floor wax. Folding chairs scraped. Somebody's grandkid kept stomping across the stage in cowboy boots. Pastor Jim said Grace and I mouthed the words, but all I could hear was the plastic rattling in my hands. Cleanup written in looping blue ink where pie table used to be. I'd run that table for 12 years. People lined up for my brown sugar crust. We used to sell out by 6. That night, I stood behind the soda machine while Vanessa introduced a new system for the supper QR codes and color-coded wristbands, and a silent auction item she'd sourced from a boutique in Cedar Rapids. She never looked at me. She didn't have to. Everyone else did. I used to think they cared, I almost said out loud. Instead, I smiled the same polite Midwestern smile I've worn since I learned it could keep a room from breaking. Here's what I want you to know. Things don't go wrong all at once. They whisper first. It started small when Noah and Vanessa moved in just for a few months after his tech startup folded. We called it landing back then. Everyone lands somewhere when life drops them. My farmhouse on County 12 has caught more than its share stray cats lost mail, and my son when he forgot he was mortal. Vanessa brought her white dishes a label maker and a vision board. She stood in my kitchen under the fan and said, "We can lighten this up." "Lighter than sunlight?" I asked, because I've got a mouth when I'm tired. She was pretty in that polished way glossed tan in February. She stacked my recipe cards in neat piles like she was filing expenses. My late husband Walt's radio went to the garage. "The static is distracting," she said. She called the garden a lot of maintenance. She said the rocking chair read heavy. There's a photo in my hallway from before Noah lost baby teeth. Walt and Noah in matching Hawkeye's caps, both grinning with their eyes. Vanessa moved that picture to the guest room and hung an abstract canvas where it used to be gray on gray like a weather alert. I asked why. She said we're staging a fresh season. If you're from a place like Willowford, you know how folks hide meanness in nice words and casserole dishes. You learn to read the steam off a potluck like tea leaves. Who brought store-bought? Who left early? Who ducked out when you needed a ride? I kept my head down. I baked the pies. I planted garlic at the fence line like Walt taught me cloves pointing up, faith pointing down. Walt used to say, "We're measured by what we tend when nobody's clapping." Then the whispers turned into a quiet plan. One Tuesday, Vanessa slid a manila folder across the kitchen table. Household expectations, she called it. A list. No shoes on the hardwood. No TV before 8 p.m. Hot plates in bedroom discouraged. She'd underlined discouraged twice like a warning. "Noah and I just need harmony," she said. "You know how noise spreads." "This house raised a drummer," I said. "And a dog that howled at trains." She laughed the way people do when they don't want witnesses. I told myself it didn't matter. A rocking chair, a radio, a picture frame, these are objects. You can live without things. But then the mail started coming, addressed to Whitmore Family Holdings. New return address. No one said a word. The first time I asked about it, Noah rubbed his forehead and said, "It's just a financial vehicle, Mom." Vanessa set it up to simplify everything. "Everything's already simple," I said. "The deed's in the safe." He smiled at the table like there was somebody hiding under it with a cue card. Exactly. When the church basement meeting ended, I stood up with the trash bags and somebody's empty potato salad bowl. Vanessa was across the room taking photos for Facebook people, holding those glossy wristbands like state fair passes. Miss Carroll, who ran the county clerk's office for 35 years, slipped beside me and took the bowl out of my hands. "You don't have to stay," she murmured. "Cleanup's my assignment," I said, light as I could manage. Miss Carroll looked at the sign-up sheet, then at me over her readers. "No, honey. Somebody assigned you a story they wanted to be true. She patted my arm and drifted off, stealing a bag of trash on her way like a thief with evidence. You want to know the truth? That little kindness, someone quietly stepping out of line for you, can hold a person together longer than pride ever will. I drove home in my old Ford with the heater coughing at my knees. The radio still worked damn sports talk, some farm report about soy prices, and I kept it loud just to hear a voice that didn't want me small. Out on County 12, the fields rolled dark, dotted with the dull eyes of deer. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was on. Vanessa likes her lighting warm and controlled. She says it makes a house feel intentional. Inside my rocking chair was gone. Garage, Vanessa said from the couch, eyes on her tablet. The living room reads crowded. Reads. She's always reading rooms like rooms are test results and people are numbers to be rounded up or down. Noah looked up soft. It's just for now, Mom. For now, I repeated like a prayer and a dare. After they went to bed, I found the chair behind plastic bins of Christmas decor. I sat there in the garage with my coat still on, listening to the dryer thump a zipper into angry applause. The air smelled like Tide and pine cleaner, and I remembered a line Walt used to say when the boys at the co-op tried to sell us things we didn't need. If it's so harmless, why do they hide it under 1,000 polite words? A little after midnight, I opened the family safe to count the same things I've counted since Walt died. Deed will insurance, a gold bracelet my mother gave me when Noah was born. The deed was still there. My name was still my name. I exhaled, folded the papers back, and locked the safe. But this isn't when it all went wrong. Not yet. On Thursday, I brought coffee to the high school library where I volunteer. You ever notice how school hallways have their own weather fluorescent snow? Locker door thunder. Kids shuffling like weather maps no one can predict. I shelved copies of Steinbeck and dog-eared paperbacks people are too proud to admit they love. That's where Coach Miller, who has taught here since the last time perms were fashionable, stopped me by the returns cart. Your Vanessa's a force, he said, as if it were a compliment you could spend. Is that so? Came by the school board meeting. Talked about budgets like she invented math. She's organized, I said. Organized can be a knife if you hold it wrong, he said, and walked off jingling keys, leaving me with a stack of To Kill a Mockingbirds and a question I didn't know how to ask out loud. Around lunch, I ran into Miss Carroll in the Dollar General, me with a basket of clothespins, her with greeting cards and hairspray. She leaned on her cart like it was a secret. You ever look up your place on the county site? She asked. I know where my fence posts are, I said. I'm not talking about the fence. I'm talking about the file. You know I can't tell you anything, she added, which, if you know, Miss Carroll means she already did. That night after dinner, I watched Vanessa pour herself the kind of wine that comes with a cork you can smell across the room. We should really talk about downsizing, Rachel, she said, scrolling with her thumb. Noah needs an office. I need a place to host my clients without the history. Without me, she didn't say. She didn't need to. Office can be the guest room, I said. Clients can meet at Blackbird Coffee like everyone else. She smiled, a soft, pitying smile, my least favorite kind. It's time to be realistic. I set my fork down one slow inch at a time. Realistic is the exact word folks use when they're about to take something they didn't build. Noah got that pinched look, the one he wore as a kid, when he told me the lamp fell over by itself. Mom, we're just asking for peace. So am I said and collected plates, because my hands needed work more than my mouth needed victory. Later, when they'd gone upstairs and the house settled into that particular Iowa quiet, the kind that lets you hear a train 10 miles away, I pulled my mother's bracelet from the safe and slid it onto my wrist. It fit loose now. I stood in the doorway of the living room, looking at the empty place where the rocking chair used to wear a path in the rug. The space seemed bigger, colder. Vanessa would have called it clean. To me, it looked like a grin missing a tooth. I don't know why I did it. Maybe to prove I still could. Maybe because a person needs to steal herself back in little pieces before she makes a run for the door. I put on my coat, grabbed a flashlight, and crossed the yard to the garden. Frost painted every leaf silver. The moon made the rows look like music paper. I knelt and tucked seed packets into the soil box Walt built from the old barn boards. Too late in the seasons. But it wasn't for growing. It was a promise to myself some things sprout out of order and still take root. When I stood up, Sheriff Dale's cruiser rolled slow past the fence like a long blink. He's got a soft spot for people who keep their word. He stopped window down. "You all right out here, Rachel? Just reminding the ground who I am." He smiled like he understood that sentence better than most. "Holler if you need anything." "Would you believe me if I said not yet?" "I would," he said. "And I'd believe you when you do." He drove on. I watched his taillights fade and thought about how men like him get called when it's already too late. I decided I'd call before it was. Back inside, I washed the dirt off my hands and saw a new envelope on the counter, addressed not to me, but to Whitmore Family Holdings. Vanessa had left a sticky note on top with a smiley face. I peeled it off and set it carefully in the trash. Then I held the envelope up to the light like it might confess. I didn't open it, not then. Instead, I slid it into the drawer with the takeout menus and batteries, and I told myself out loud this time, "Pay attention." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Here's the part that matters. We always think the first big wrong thing will be loud. A slammed door, a confession, a fight in the front yard with neighbors pretending they're not at their windows. But in my story, the first big wrong thing was a black Sharpie line through my name on a church sign-up sheet and a woman who smiled while she did it. If you've ever been moved off your life by someone with neat penmanship, you know what I mean. Stick around. This gets messier before it gets clean. And if you're listening from a porch or a break room or the front seat of your car, drop a comment and tell me where you are. I want to see how far a small town story can travel when somebody finally tells the truth. There's a certain rhythm to a small town morning. Trucks rattling past the post office before 8. The smell of biscuits drifting out of Blackbird coffee. The same 3 men on the corner bench talking soy prices like the whole county depended on their opinion, which in a way it did. I kept that rhythm even when everything in me wanted to slam the brakes. Because when you're living under someone else's roof scratch, that when someone else has moved into your roof and started making rules, you learn quick the only way to survive is to keep moving like nothing's wrong. Vanessa had gotten bolder. She no longer suggested changes. She announced them like the morning she swept into the kitchen in a silk robe that didn't look like it had ever met a washing machine. "I've decided the pantry needs a total overhaul," she said, tugging open the door like she was revealing a crime scene. "All this clutter. It's time we streamlined." I looked at the shelves organized my way for decades. Baking on the left, cans on the top, Walt's jars of pickled beets on the bottom. "Clutter works for me," I said. She laughed like I'd told a joke that wasn't worth finishing and started pulling jars off the shelves. By the end of the day, everything was in matching glass canisters with chalkboard labels. "And my beets too niche," she said, handing me the box. I told myself again that a jar was just a jar, but it wasn't. Not really. It was a piece of proof, another tile in a mosaic I was starting to see. One Tuesday, I was shelving books in the high school library when Miss Carroll shuffled in. She didn't work there, but retirement had never stopped her from knowing exactly where everyone was supposed to be. "You got a minute?" she asked, pushing a return cart like she owned the place. We ducked into the back office. She reached into her purse, pulled out a folded scrap of paper, and slid it across the desk like she was passing contraband. "Parcel number, filing date, transfer ID." "Check the county website," she said. "Might want to be sitting down." That night after dinner, when Vanessa and Noah retreated upstairs to whatever budget review they held in their bedroom, I typed that number into the county assessor's portal. There it was. Whitmore Family Trust, filed 2 months ago, trustee Noah Whitmore, successor trustee Vanessa L. Whitmore, owner of record the trust, not me. I stared until my eyes blurred. The next morning, I poured my coffee and asked as casual as I could, "What's this about a family trust?" Vanessa didn't even flinch. "Oh, that's just a financial vehicle. Makes things simpler for tax purposes." "Things are already simple," I said. "Deeds in the safe." She smiled over her mug, that soft, pitying curve of the mouth I'd grown to despise. "Exactly. I'd spent my life believing that if you kept your side of the street clean, people would leave you in peace. That was my first mistake. So I started my just-in-case file, receipts, bank statements, a notepad filled with dates and times, what was moved, what was said, who was in the room. I wrote in tiny, tight script so I could fit it all. Tucked the whole thing in my sewing basket under a half-finished quilt top. Vanessa never touched my sewing, said it gave her hives. One night around 10, I heard them talking in the living room. I was sitting in the dark at the top of the stairs, my mother's gold bracelet in my fist. "She's stubborn," Vanessa said. "But if we can get her to take a trip visit her sister, whatever, we can finish the transfer without her breathing down our necks." "She's not going anywhere," Noah replied. "You don't know my mom? She's dug in." "Then we make it uncomfortable," she said. My knuckles went white. Every instinct screamed to march down there and end it right then. But I stayed still, let the words sink in like rain through gravel. Now I knew. They weren't waiting me out. They were planning me out. 2 days later, I drove to the next town over and parked in front of a low brick building with Thomas Alvarez, attorney at law, stenciled on the glass. Tom's the kind of lawyer who still wears scuffed cowboy boots with his suit and keeps peppermints in a jar on the counter. What would it take, I asked after the small talk, to challenge a trust if my signature wasn't on it? He sat back, folded his hands. "If your name was forged, Rachel, you've got a fight on your hands. But forgery leaves fingerprints. Then I guess I'd better start dusting." Back home, I became a student of their habits. What time they left for errands. How long Vanessa's yoga class ran over. Which drawer she kept the spare keys in. I noticed how she angled her laptop so the screen glare hid the numbers. How she never let the mail sit on the counter without sorting it first. How she spoke to Noah in low tones when she thought I couldn't hear. And every time something felt off, I wrote it down. The oddest clue came from the most ordinary place, the church bulletin board. I was pinning up a flyer for the literacy program when I saw Vanessa's handwriting on a slip tacked under community announcements. Meeting. Whitmore Holdings Budget Committee, 6 p.m. Budget Committee. For my house. Some nights, when they were out, I'd slip into the garage and sit in my rocking chair, the one she'd banished out there. I'd think about Walt. About the way he'd lean back and listen more than he spoke. "Never show your hand too early," he used to say when we played cards with the neighbors. "Let 'em think you're holding less than you are." I understood that better now. A few people started noticing. Pastor Jim asked if I was all right after Sunday service. Sheriff Dale slowed his cruiser one evening when I was out checking the garden fence. "You good, Rachel?" he called. "Not yet," I said. "But I will be." He nodded like that was enough. By the end of the month, my just-in-case file had grown into a small box bank statements, photos of documents, a printout of that trust filing from the county website. I didn't know exactly when I'd use it, but I knew the day was coming. And here's the thing, when someone's trying to erase you, the most dangerous thing you can do isn't yell, it's prepare. If you've ever been underestimated, looked right through like you're not even there, you know the strange kind of power in it. They don't see you coming. Stick around. The next part, that's when they finally did. And if you've ever had to quietly fight for something that was yours all along, tell me about it in the comments. I want to know how many of us are out there biding our time until the right moment. It was a Saturday morning in late October when everything snapped. The kind of morning that smells like wood smoke and wet leaves when the air's just sharp enough to remind you winter's watching from down the road. I'd been out in the yard trimming back Walt's rose bushes before the frost when I heard the front door latch click behind me. At first, I thought it was just the wind catching it. But when I walked up the porch steps and turned the knob, nothing. Locked. I dug my key out of my jacket pocket. Slid it in. It wouldn't turn. I rang the bell still in my gardening gloves. No answer. Knocked harder. Finally, the door cracked open. Vanessa stood there in a cream sweater dress hair in one of those perfect low buns you only see on Pinterest boards. "Oh," she said like she'd just noticed me on her porch. "We changed the locks." "Changed the locks? It's just, for now, we need some space, Rachel. Things have felt tense." I glanced past her shoulder into my own house. "Where's Noah?" "At the office," she said like that explained everything. She offered no key, no plan, just a polite little smile, the kind you'd give to a neighbor asking for sugar you didn't have. I didn't argue, didn't give her the satisfaction. I walked down the steps across the driveway, got into my truck and drove. 3 blocks later, I pulled over in front of the old feed store. My chest was tight, not from sadness. Not yet. From the sheer absurdity of being locked out of the place where I'd celebrated birthdays, mourned my husband, raised my son. I stayed parked until my breath stopped coming in short bursts. Then I drove on out to Route 6, where the old extended stay motel squats between a gas station and a bait shop. Checked in under my own name. Room 112. That night, I didn't sleep. The bedspread was scratchy. The air smelled faintly of bleach and cigarettes. But there was a lock on the door, and I was the only one with the key. I sat at the little round table and spread out my just-in-case file. Started circling dates, account numbers, and anything with Vanessa's name on it. And I thought, this isn't just disrespect, it's a plan. Sunday morning, I made one call. To Tom Alvarez. "I'm ready," I told him. He met me in the motel lobby an hour later, wearing his scuffed boots and a look that said he'd skipped church for this. I walked him through every scrap of paper. He barely spoke, just nodded, flipping through pages, occasionally making a note. When I finished, he closed the folder and said, "Rachel, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is theft." By Tuesday, Tom had pulled the property records from the county clerk. The original deed from 30 years ago listed me and Walt as co-owners. The updated record filed just 8 weeks earlier showed the property transferred to the Whitmore Family Trust. The signature, "My name, but not my hand," Sloppy Tom muttered. "The slant's wrong. The pen pressure's uneven. Whoever forged this wasn't even trying to hide it well." The notary stamp belonged to someone named Denise Porter. Tom made a note to visit her in person. 2 days later, he called me at the motel. "Denise says she never saw you sign anything. Vanessa brought the document in, said you'd already signed it. Denise filed it as a favor." "That enough?" I asked. "It's enough to get us an injunction," he said. By Friday, we had it a court order freezing all trust assets and barring any further changes until the case was reviewed. That night, I got a text from Noah. "We need to talk. Things have gone too far." No apology, no explanation, just that. I didn't answer. The following week, Tom and I walked into the county courthouse for the first hearing. Vanessa sat at the far table with her lawyer, all pressed blouse and tight jaw. Noah was beside her, looking smaller than I remembered. When the judge entered, the room tightened. Tom went first, laying out the chain of events: original ownership, the forged transfer, the notary's statement, the trust bank accounts. Then he slid a photocopy of Walt's handwriting across the bench. A note from years ago. "If anything happens to me, Rachel keeps the house." Non-negotiable. Vanessa's lawyer objected. The judge allowed it. When it was my turn, I stood. My voice didn't shake. I told them I'd built a life in that house, that I'd cared for it, paid for it, and trusted my family to respect that. That trust was broken. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just told the truth, plain as fence posts. Vanessa's lawyer tried to spin it as a miscommunication, that the trust was for my benefit to streamline estate planning. But when the judge asked directly who had signed the deed, Vanessa claimed she assumed Noah handled it. The judge didn't look convinced. We left with the injunction still in place and a date for a full hearing. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was a crack in the wall they'd built around me. On the courthouse steps, Tom said quietly, "They'll scramble now." That's when people make mistakes, and scramble they did. Within a week, Vanessa sent me a formal invitation to dinner at the new steakhouse downtown. Noah called twice. Both times, I let it go to voicemail. The second message was short, "Mom, please. Let's talk like family." I stared at the phone, thinking about the day they changed the locks. About standing on my own porch, holding gloves still warm from the garden, being told I didn't belong. Family, I thought, doesn't need a locksmith. That's the thing about a breaking point, it's not always loud. Sometimes it's just the moment you stop caring if the bridge burns because you've already built another road. If you've ever had that moment when you realize the people who hurt you can't hurt you the same way again, you know how light your hands feel afterward. Stick around. The next part, that's when I stopped playing defense. And if you've ever faced someone who thought they had you cornered, tell me how you turned it around. I think we could all use those stories right now. The courthouse hearing didn't end the way movies do. No gavel slam, no gasps from the gallery. Just the judge's steady voice keeping the injunction in place and telling both parties to prepare for trial. It wasn't an ending, it was a door propped open. Still, by the time I stepped outside into the cold November air, something had shifted. Vanessa and Noah weren't untouchable anymore, and they knew it. The first sign came that very evening. A friend from church, Mary Ellen, called me from her kitchen. "Saw Vanessa at the co-op this morning," she said. She was alone, wouldn't meet my eyes. Mary Ellen has never been one for subtlety. People are talking Rachel, and not in her favor. Small towns have long memories, but they also turn quick when they smell smoke. The same folks who'd been impressed by Vanessa's modern ideas were now whispering about forged signatures and frozen accounts. Noah called twice that week. I didn't answer. When the third call came, I picked up. His voice was tired. "Mom, we can fix this without dragging it out." "You mean without a court record?" I said. He didn't deny it. "I just don't want us to lose everything." I almost laughed. "You already risked everything, Noah. I'm just trying to take back what's mine." While they scrambled, I started thinking about what I'd actually do if when the judge restored the deed. At first, I imagined moving back in, putting everything back exactly the way it was before they came. My rocking chair in the corner. Walt's radio on the kitchen shelf, the photo of him and Noah in matching Hawkeye's caps back in the hallway. But the more I pictured it, the more it felt wrong. The house had been a home once. Now it was just walls. And walls can hold echoes you don't want to hear anymore. 2 weeks later, the county clerk called to confirm something for Tom. When she hung up, she asked me quietly, "Rachel, what are you going to do if you win?" The question sat with me all afternoon. By the time I went to bed, I knew the answer. When the final ruling came 3 weeks before Christmas, it was almost anticlimactic. The court declared the deed transfer invalid. The trust dissolved. The property and all associated assets restored to my sole ownership. Vanessa didn't look at me when the judge read the decision. Noah glanced over once, but I couldn't read his face. Tom shook my hand outside. "It's yours, Rachel. All of it." I went back to the farmhouse that afternoon with the keys clutched in my hand. The lock turned easily now. Inside, the air smelled faintly of Vanessa's candles, vanilla, and something chemical. Everything was arranged her way, brass knobs on the kitchen cabinets, abstract paintings in the living room. My belongings stacked neatly in the guest room as if I'd been a tenant. On the hallway shelf was that family portrait, the one she'd cropped me out of. I didn't move it, not yet. That night, I slept in the guest room under the quilt I'd sewn with Walt decades ago. The quiet was heavier than I remembered. By morning, I'd made my decision. I called a realtor. "I'm selling," I told her. She hesitated. "This is a beautiful property." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I said. I fought for it so I could choose what to do with it. And I choose to let it go. Within a month, the sale was complete. I used part of the money to buy an old inn on Main Street, 3 stories of worn, wood-peeling paint, and more history than most folks in town remembered. The sign out front had faded to a ghost of its former name. I had it repainted Hearth House. The plan was simple: turn it into a transitional home for widowed and displaced women. The kind of place I wish I'd had the night I slept on that scratchy motel bed. I didn't make a big announcement, just got to work. Local businesses donated furniture. The high school shop class built bookshelves. Mary Ellen brought over quilts from the church sewing circle. By spring, we'd housed our first 2 residents. One was a woman named Gloria, whose son had temporarily moved in with her and ended up taking over her house until she found herself with a suitcase on the porch. When she walked into her room at Hearth House, she set her red thermos on the dresser and said, "Feels good to be somewhere nobody's trying to shrink me." I knew exactly what she meant. Vanessa and Noah. They moved to the city, I heard. Something about a fresh start. Occasionally, I'd get an envelope in the mail with no return address, just my name, and neat handwriting I recognized as Noah's. I'd place them in the back of my desk drawer without reading. Some things you don't need to reopen. One evening, Tom stopped by to drop off paperwork for the Hearth House nonprofit filing. We sat in the front parlor with mugs of coffee watching the light fade over Main Street. "You ever regret not moving back in?" he asked. I shook my head. I didn't fight to keep the house. I fought to keep the choice. That's different. The thing about rebuilding is it's not about getting back what you lost. It's about making something better from what's left. If you've ever had to start over, you know that feeling, the mix of grief and relief when you finally put your hands on something that's yours again, even if it doesn't look the way it used to. Stick around. The last part of this story isn't about them at all. It's about what you do once you're free. And if you've ever turned a loss into a place of shelter, literal or otherwise, drop your story in the comments. I think you'd be surprised how many of us are out here building something new from the ashes. It's funny. When the fight ends, you think you'll feel nothing but relief. And sure, there was some of that. But mostly, there was space. Space where the anger used to be. And I had to decide what to fill it with. Hearth House was quiet in the early mornings. I'd come down the creaky stairs in my slippers, put on a pot of coffee in the kitchen, and sit by the window with a blue shawl around my shoulders. Walt gave me that shawl our first Christmas together. Said it would keep me warm until I'm old and bossy. I guess I've got one of those down. The street outside was just waking delivery trucks rumbling past the bakery sign, flickering on the smell of cinnamon rolls sneaking in when the wind was right. Some mornings, I'd hear soft footsteps behind me. One of the women, Gloria or sometimes Jean, would wander in still in her robe and pour a cup of coffee. We didn't talk much at that hour. Just sat in the same room like we'd all survived some long winter and didn't need to explain how. Running Hearth House wasn't just about beds and hot meals. It was about giving people back their sense of ownership over their own lives. I remembered that motel room I stayed in the night Vanessa locked me out the way the door clicked shut, and I knew no one could take that key from me unless I let them. That's the feeling I wanted every woman here to have. So I made sure every resident got her own set of keys. Not just to her room, but to the front door too. Word spread faster than I expected. By summer, the local paper ran a story about us. A week later, a regional news crew came out. The headline read, "From Victim to Founder, How One Woman Turned Betrayal into Shelter for Others." I didn't like the word victim, but I liked the calls and letters that came after. One afternoon, I got a short plain envelope in the mail, postmarked from the city. No return address. Inside, I think I see things more clearly now. I'm sorry for how it ended. I hope you're doing well. Noah's handwriting. I read it once, folded it carefully, slipped it into the same desk drawer where the other unopened ones lived. Some wounds don't need to be redressed every time they itch. By fall, we had a little vegetable garden out back, tomatoes, peppers, herbs. Gloria was out there every morning, red thermos in one hand, trowel in the other. One day she came in with dirt under her nails and said, "You know, I haven't planted anything in 10 years. Not since I lost my place." I handed her the seed packets from my own garden at the farmhouse. "Go ahead," I said. "Ground's good here." That night, I sat in my small apartment above the inn and opened my old recipe box. There it was, Walt's cinnamon roll card, butter-stained corners soft. The last time Noah and I had laughed together was over cinnamon rolls in a snowstorm when he was 9. The power had gone out, and we'd lit candles and told stories while the dough rose. I made them that night not for nostalgia, but because the smell of cinnamon still felt like home without the ache. By morning, the kitchen smelled so good the residents followed their noses in. We ate them warm at the long oak table, no one in a hurry to leave. One of the women asked me, "How did you know to do this? Turn something ugly into something like this?" I thought for a second and said, "Because staying angry felt like letting them keep the keys." She smiled like she understood. A month later, Trina, my attorney through all of it, came by with a manila folder. She'd been helping me set up the Hearth House Foundation as a permanent nonprofit. "It's official," she said. "This place can't be sold or repurposed without board approval. It's here to stay." We sat on the porch drinking coffee, and I told her something I'd been thinking for a while. "You know, I don't think I ever wanted revenge." "No," she said. "You wanted to stop handing yourself away." "Exactly." Not long after I was walking back from the farmer's market when I saw Sheriff Dale's cruiser parked outside Hearth House. He was leaning against the hood talking to Gloria. He waved me over. "Just checking in," he said. "Wanted to see the place you built." I gave him the quick tour. When we stopped in the common room with its mismatched couches and shelves lined with paperback novels, he said, "You know, this feels like it's been here forever." That's the goal, I told him. Safe places should feel older than trouble. In December, we hosted our first holiday dinner. The long table was crowded residents, volunteers, a few friends from church. There was laughter and clinking silverware, and not a single polite, pitying smile in the room. Before dessert, Gloria stood up. "We wanted to thank Rachel," she said, holding up a small wrapped box. Inside was a new set of garden gloves. Soft leather with my initials stitched on the cuff. I felt something in my chest loosen. Walt's old gloves were still in a drawer upstairs, stiff from years of use. These were for new things. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood alone in the kitchen. The only light came from the tree in the corner, casting soft gold across the walls. I thought about the farmhouse, the motel, the courtroom, the day I first turned the key in the door here, and I realized something. I wasn't carrying the story of what they'd done anymore. I was carrying the story of what I'd built afterward. If you've ever had to choose between holding on and moving forward, you know how heavy the old keys can feel. Me, I finally set mine down. If this story reached you, if you've ever turned a loss into a life you could be proud of, tell me about it in the comments. I want to know how far stories like this can travel, and how many of us are out here turning our broken pieces into something worth passing on. Because the truth is, you don't have to win everything. You just have to stop giving yourself away.